Hi, everybody. Welcome to Princess State of Mind, episode 3. I'm Faith Moore, and this is the show where we talk about fiction, fairy tales, and the fairer sex. And this episode is all about you and your questions. All week, I asked you guys to submit questions, and you did, which is awesome. So, no guests today. You're stuck with me, and we are just going to answer all your questions. I have them all here. I printed them out. That's very low tech of me, but it's true. And I'm just going to get started. Here we go. All right. The first question is from Elijah. It says, when discussing fairy tales, do you prefer using the film adaptations, Disney or otherwise, or the literature itself, and why? Okay, so I actually think that the Disney versions of the fairy tales should be looked at as an entity unto themselves. I think that it's almost a different story that uses the themes and the tropes of fairy tales. And that's even debatable when we get into some of the later Disney princess movies that kind of go off of the traditional tropes, mostly I think because they didn't know that those tropes even existed. So personally, I love talking about Disney movies and Disney princesses in general, and I love talking about them as if they were literature or something that is worth analyzing and discussing as if it was not just a cartoon for kids, because I don't actually think it is. I think that there are some really deep themes and ideas in there worth discussing. Obviously, I also really love the originals, and before I talk or write about a Disney fairy tale, I will read the original. And I think there's some really interesting, amazing, and often very weird stuff in the original fairy tales. But so I just think that they're two different things, and that you have to look at them as different things, but interconnected in that you can't lose sight of the symbolism and the tropes and the allegories that the original fairy tales were using. So I think both is the answer, but in general, I really like to look at the Disney movies because that's my thing. All right, the next question comes from Eric. He says, there's a moment in Brave where Merida thinks the big, strong, confident, masculine man is the suitor she's hearing about and gets excited about it. Alas, the suitor is the tiny, scrawny boy behind the man, and she deflates. Is this a subtle moment of redemption in this weird movie? All right, you guys know what I think about Brave. I hate Brave. I think that it's the worst Disney princess movie ever made. And this is one of the reasons why. The treatment of men in that movie is horrible. All of the men are these sort of emasculated baby men who act all big and tough, but then they need women to come in and basically mother them all the time. Like the big, strong King Fergus is literally at one point led by the ear by Queen Eleanor out of some sort of brawl that he was engaged in. I just think that is a total corruption of not just men and who men are and what men are, but also Disney men and fairy tale men and what they represent. All of those ideals of bravery and loyalty and protection and manhood are just kind of corrupted in that movie again and again and again. So that moment where Merida thinks that, the big strong guy is potentially her suitor, and then it turns out not to be true, is just another moment of that. It's another moment of, you see, this idea of men that you have been seeing in all of these fairy tales and Disney movies up until this moment isn't true. That's not real. That's not for you. She doesn't have any possibility of marrying a guy who she might even want to be with, a guy that isn't this kind of awful, childlike, emasculated guy. So I think it's more of like a sight gag in the movie to kind of indicate that philosophy that the movie is pushing, rather than any kind of statement about who Merida would go for. Because the movie is essentially saying that she's not going to go for anyone, and that she's going to stay home indefinitely and be a child. So sorry, I don't think there's any moment of redemption in that movie. Sorry. Okay. Next question. Oh, also about Brave. It says, why is Merida's movie called Brave and not Fate? This is from Rachel. I don't actually know the answer to that. I don't think anybody does, but originally, I mean, the movie Brave went through a lot of iterations before we got the dumpster fire of a movie that we ended up with. And it was originally called, I think, The Bear and the Bow, or Bear and the Bow. And there was going to be a prince, and there was all kinds of more traditional stuff in there. But Brenda Chapman, who wrote or created the story and co-directed, was very intent on Merida being this uber feminist princess. And that was kind of the big thing that they were doing with this movie. And so it kind of shifted away from that traditional story and became what it is, for better or worse, mostly worse. And so I think the reason it's called Brave is just to kind of tie into the ideology that it's trying to create, which is like, wow, look at this awesome, brave princess who shoots bows and arrows, and doesn't that make her something or other? So, you know, I think that Fate would have been a fine title, except the philosophy around fate in the movie doesn't actually make any sense either. I mean, like, the definition of fate, for example, in a dictionary where we might find definitions of things, is essentially something that's going to happen to you that you can't change. And then the movie's tagline is change your fate. So I don't know. Why does the movie do anything? Sorry, I can't answer that. All right, what's the next question? Let's see, from Jacob. Jacob says, what was it like growing up? So I assume, Jacob, that you're asking me what was it like growing up with Andrew Klavan as my father, not like what was it like growing up. It was great. So I will answer what I assume you're asking, which is that it was great. Sorry guys, I have the best dad that anybody could ask for. And you know, when I was a kid, my dad was not Andrew Klavan of the Andrew Klavan Show. He was Andrew Klavan, the novelist, and my dad. You know, now we walk down the street and people recognize him, which is really amazing and awesome, because they should, because he's great. But when I was a kid, that wasn't true. But I have always been really proud of my dad and really in awe of him. And he has always been a source of great wisdom and inspiration, and someone who really, truly has always had my best interest at heart, and has always really understood what it was like to be me, which for a kid is really, really important. And he always just wanted me to follow whatever made me happy, and he didn't have any agenda other than that. And what else can you really ask for in a parent? So I'm really glad that now all of you guys get to experience the wisdom that was mine since birth. So that's what it was like growing up, I guess. Let's see. Varick asks, what do you think makes a Disney prince a Disney prince? Okay, well, I have to drink from the Bell cup before answering this. All right, so that's a good question, and there are probably a few different answers to this. The first is to say that in a fairy tale, like the original fairy tales, a prince has a really specific job, and he symbolizes something really specific. And that is why, especially in the early Disney movies and in a lot of the fairy tales, he doesn't really have much to do. He doesn't have a big part, or even sometimes a name. And the reason for that is a lot of these princess stories, almost all of these princess stories, are stories about the princess, the woman, emerging out of childhood into her womanhood. And sometimes the symbolism of that is really about kind of the actual logistics of that, like puberty and menarche and those kind of things. And sometimes it's more just kind of like a journey of breaking away from a mother or an older female figure, usually represented by like a crone or an evil stepmother or something like that. So the prince in that story is essentially a symbol of her having emerged into her womanhood. Because he represents, so her womanhood is represented by her ability to have children. So it's not that she must now have children, but now her body is ready to have children. And that is the symbol that she's now a woman. And so the prince is the symbol of that, the consummation of that, which is, also what shows us that she is ready to leave her family and start a new family, even if that's not something she's necessarily going to do. So the prince kind of comes in at the end to represent that. And that's why he kind of just shows up and kisses her, or, shows up and says, let's get married now, or whatever it is. It's not because we're trying to promote, or fairy tales are trying to promote the idea that you should just run off with some guy, or that, girls can't do anything except fall asleep and be woken up by true love's kiss. It's a symbol that she's ready, that she's reached her adulthood. So I think in the early Disney movies, that's really what it is. Snow White's prince, whose name is literally the prince, or Prince Charming from Cinderella, or Prince Philip from Sleeping Beauty. They're all just kind of symbolic, but what they symbolize is the kind of ideal of manhood. So loyalty, bravery, protection, all of these things that later on, as Disney movies came out of the sort of symbolic tropes and allegories of the original fairy tales and moved into a more sort of realistic, although obviously there's like magical elements, but more realistic character-wise storytelling, then the princes kind of become, they take on the characteristics for real that they sort of symbolized before. So, you've got, who have you got? You've got sort of like Aladdin, who's brave and plucky, and you've got the Beast, who is very kind of masculine and full of rage and has to channel all of that. And so I think the main thing about what is a Disney prince is he has to be the ideal of manhood, meaning he has to embody the qualities that men embody. And he can do that either symbolically by being the handsome prince, which is just a symbolic representation of all of that, or he can do it more realistically by being that kind of a guy. But he can't be evil. He can be flawed, but he can't be, he's not Gaston. He has to be at least redeemable, or there has to be some good inside of him in order for him to be a true prince. All right. Brian says, how many movies do you have to watch because of us? And the answer to that is not many, because I want to watch them all, even the ones that I hate, because I love writing about Disney princesses. Although there are some movies that you guys recommend and then I add them to my watch list, but that's cool too. So I don't know about half, like want to, not have to. Dave says, is your middle name No, K-N-O-W, and are you tired of this joke? My middle name is not No, so no, it is not No. And yes, I am tired of this joke. I actually had no idea what Faith No More was until you guys started asking me this question. Not now, but back when you guys started asking me this question. And I had to look it up. It's apparently some band from some, I don't know, I don't listen to that kind of music, I guess. The K in Faith K Moore, so my Twitter handle is @FaithKMoore, stands for Clavin, which is my maiden name. My middle name has nothing to do with K. My middle initial is E. Faith E sounds kind of weird. So, and Faith @FaithMoore was taken. So Faith K Moore. Edge of the Sandbox from Twitter asks, who is the fairest of them all? The technical answer to that is Snow White. John asks, are there any good male role models for young boys in fairy tales? Growing up, I ignored almost every male character in the Disney films because the princesses were more compelling. Are me and Andrew just stuck with our gritty true crime protagonists? I guess that's Andrew Clavin. Yeah, there's lots of great role models, but like I was saying just a minute ago, a lot of times they're symbolic. And the amazing thing about fairy tales, which is why it's so unfortunate that feminists have decided that they're awful, is that fairy tales are women's stories. They are beautiful, strong women at the center of a story, and the men are sort of these peripheral characters. And I don't understand why that's not feminist. So agreed that in especially Disney princess movies, the character that you care about is the princess, especially except I guess for Aladdin, where there is a Disney princess, but Aladdin is the protagonist. So in that sense, you know, if you're watching a Disney princess movie, you're probably rooting for and caring most about the princess. But that doesn't mean that there aren't male characters worth noticing. I would particularly point to Prince Philip from Sleeping Beauty. That's a really interesting movie in that all of the symbols and tropes of traditional fairy tales are in there in the narrative that Aurora goes through, but a lot of the peripheral characters are much more realistic, including Maleficent, who is a truly frightening Disney villain. And Philip, too, is a much more realistic prince than, say, Snow White's prince or Cinderella's. And you know, he's the guy that kills the dragon with the sword of truth or the shield of virtue or whatever it is, which I think is really, really great and amazing. And he also is willing to give up the throne for Aurora, which is very kind of amazing in that time period. And you know, and then in the later movies, I mean, the Beast. I would go with the Beast as being a really cool male character, especially since he moved, you know, from being unable to channel all of his masculine urges to becoming aware that there could be a reason to channel them, and then doing that work. And I think that's an amazing kind of role model to look for a lot of guys. So I definitely think they're there, but I think, you know, yeah, the princess movies are about the princesses, and they might be more interesting because of that. Okay, Mark says, what are your thoughts on The Lion King, the 1994 version? I like The Lion King. I think until Frozen, I think it was the highest grossing animated film of all time. I could be wrong about that, but it's beloved. I really like it. I think, you know, it's not a princess movie, although a lot of people wonder why Nala is not an official princess, but apparently you have to be human. So, you know, it's not like my favorite, but it's definitely up there. I mean, when you look at sort of which films qualify as Disney Renaissance films, that would be starting with Little Mermaid. And I end it with The Lion King because I think that the films that came after that were terrible, like Pocahontas and Mulan. But a lot of people ended at Mulan. I think it's one of the great movies. I'm a fan. Okay, at MK Ultra says, does anyone ever make Faith No More jokes to you? Yes, about 3 questions ago. Roland says, Ben Shapiro maintains that Let It Go is a terrible song because girls go around singing it. I maintain that it's a song for a particular point in a certain character's life, and it is ultimately proven false. What say you? All right, well, I don't know if it's a bad song because little girls go around singing it. I mean, that is kind of annoying. But I actually have a big issue with Let It Go and Elsa's character in the movie. Let It Go is essentially the I Want song in the movie, which is a term that means basically like the song where the princess explains what it is that she wants, and then she goes out and gets it. So like Ariel sings Part of That World, or Belle sings I Want Adventure in the Great White Somewhere, or whatever. And so Elsa is essentially saying, like, I want to be able to use my powers and have no one care what I'm doing, and no right, no wrong, no rules for me, right? Which is actually a terrible message. And it's a message that Elsa herself comes to feel is terrible, which I think Roland is alluding to here. But the problem is that it's also her moment of transformation. So for example, think Cinderella getting the ball gown and the glass slippers. And for Cinderella, that moment is the moment where her inner beauty, which has always been there, is suddenly made manifest to the world so that she can go to the ball and the prince can see it and recognize her for her true self. And that's all great for Cinderella. But for Elsa, that moment it really shouldn't be her moment of transformation. It's really her moment of kind of like angst and teen angst and confusion. She gets to suddenly have this awesome slinky dress with this cool train and the hair and the ice slippers and everything. And it's very evocative of Cinderella, except that this actually isn't her final iteration. And in fact, what she's doing is terrible. You shouldn't be isolating yourself. You shouldn't let, if you have this power, but it's dangerous, you shouldn't be like letting it run rampant. She's also cursed all of Arendelle to eternal winter, and she's got to solve that. So I think the problem with the song is that it sends the wrong message and comes at the wrong point in Elsa's journey. Except that because it's so catchy and because it comes with the Cinderella imagery, little girls kind of latch onto it as that moment of like, I am now finally myself, except that she isn't finally herself, and it's all wrong. So that's why I don't like that song and that moment in the movie. Okay. Tao Tensua from Twitter asks, can Carrie of Kingdom Hearts be considered a Disney princess based on her role as one of the 7 princesses of Heart? Also, Alice in Wonderland is in this club of 5 official princesses. The technical answer to that is no, because the official Disney princesses are designated by the Disney Princess franchise, which is a marketing venture started in 2000 by Andy Mooney. I think that's his name. And they only recognize 11 official princesses. So sorry. Cassie says, do you feel like the live action remakes are changing the basic principles of princesses? I haven't seen Cinderella, but I personally liked the small changes to Belle. Curious to see what they do with Jasmine and Mulan. Yeah, so I think the only reason to make a live action version of a cartoon is if you're going to flesh out the characters in some way and make them more real, right? So in a cartoon, you kind of have the leeway to sort of use more symbolism or more kind of unrealistic tropes and ways of telling the story. And particularly, as I've said before, like in the early Disney movies, Disney princess movies, there's a lot more of the traditional fairy tale symbolism. And I think if you're going to put it into the real world, it has to become more real in some way. And that doesn't mean it can't have the symbolic elements. It just means that, why are there real people doing this fairy tale thing unless you have some different story to tell? And that's why I actually didn't really like the Cinderella movie. I thought it was sweet. I thought it was very beautiful. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. I just sort of thought it was like, we've seen this, that was we've seen the cartoon. I want to know more about the characters' motivations and the characters' thoughts and feelings and dreams if they're going to be real people. And so I guess I appreciated the Beauty and the Beast live action more because of that. I didn't agree with all of the changes that they made. I particularly hated the way, and it was more honestly in the interviews that the cast was giving than it was in the actual film, but I hated all of the kind of like, feminism of it all. Like, Belle is already a very strong, very independent, very brave woman. So she doesn't need to wear boots instead of ballet flats in order to signify that. And she doesn't need to invent a washing machine either. So that kind of stuff I didn't like very much. I really liked, and actually when I was talking with Laurel last episode of this, we talked about this a little. I really liked what they did with the Beast, because I thought it was a brave choice to kind of go in a totally different direction with him, which was that he was this kind of misanthropic but very well educated guy who just kind of needed a nudge in the right direction of why he should kind of come out of his own own world. And so I liked that. So I think, I mean, yeah, I'm interested to see what happens with Jasmine and Mulan also, but that's what I think needs to happen in a live action movie if it's going to be worthwhile. Okay, Joel asks, are you really a cartoon? And I have no comment. Melissa asks, who drew your Abby, your avatar, and why is there no tiara? So if you guys watched the last episode, you will know that Laurel Springer drew my avatar, which is truly a dream come true to be drawn as a Disney princess. And you can follow her at Laurelyn Arts on Twitter and see her other amazing artwork. And it has no tiara because that is my casual avatar, and I only bring out my formal avatar on special occasions. Jacob asks, hang on, I gotta turn the page. And I can't because they're stuck together. All right. He says, what princess or prince or warrior who has not had a major film needs to have a movie made for them? I guess this is slightly cheating because there is a movie featuring this person, but I would love to see a King Arthur Disney movie or any kind of Knights of the Round Table type thing. And I know there's Sword in the Stone, obviously, is about King Arthur. But actually, I rewatched that movie recently. It is very strange and not particularly, it doesn't particularly promote the things that you would want a King Arthur movie to promote, like bravery and loyalty and courage in battle and all that kind of stuff. It's not really about that. And Arthur's a kid and there's a lot of animals. So I would love to see an actual King Arthur movie or some kind of knights in shining armor type movie. All right, last question from Cameron. What do you think of the phrase princess syndrome? The idea that some women, more so teenagers, think certain work is beneath them. I'm curious of your opinion about the attitude and the choice of the name for it. So I don't know that I've actually ever really heard this, maybe sort of in the periphery of my consciousness. But so the first thing that I'll say is no work is beneath a fairy tale princess. First of all, I think that there's a lot of confusion these days between a real princess like Kate Middleton or Meghan Markle or something, and a fairy tale princess. Those are two completely different things. A real princess is a real person who happens to have been born a princess or have married a prince, and they are subject to all of the foibles and flaws of real people, and in our current day and age, also under the scrutiny and eye of constant paparazzi and public opinion. And so that's not what we mean when we're talking about a fairy tale princess. Those are people. Like, you are people, I'm a person. That's maybe a person who was born a princess might be spoiled and entitled and feel that something is beneath her, or maybe she doesn't. People are people, right? And everyone's different. A fairy tale princess is a symbol of the ideal of womanhood. And let me be very clear, that doesn't mean that the ideal woman is beautiful or has married a prince or has been born a princess. It doesn't mean that at all. All of those things are just symbols representing that the person embodied in this princess trope is somehow the sort of truest version of themselves, and that version of themselves is good in some way. And so the outer beauty is representative of inner beauty. The fact that she's a princess is just representative of how she is high. She's high born, or, a high lady in the sense that she has reached her truest potential. So in that sense, that kind of princess has nothing is below her, and many of the princesses in the fairy tales do all kinds of drudgery and chores, and they always do it with a smile, not because they love housework, but because part of their inner goodness is to be optimistic and kind and see the good in everything and everyone. And so in that sense, so I would assume that the princess that is referred to, if it's princess syndrome, is a real life princess or a kind of caricature of a real life princess. And so I think we just need to make those distinctions because I really think that's part of the whole problem with the feminist critique of fairy tales and Disney movies, is that they don't actually understand what a princess is and represents. Because if you took a fairy tale princess and turned her into a real, if the blue fairy came down and turned her into a real girl, she could look like anyone. She could be, ugly. She could be fat. That would be fine. But she isn't a real girl. She's a symbol. So, I think if we could understand that, if we could figure that out, then we could watch these movies and read these stories in a much more positive way, in the way that they were intended. So we are out of time and out of questions. So thank you to all of you who submitted questions. I hope I answered them to your liking. And we will do this again. So keep your eye on my Twitter at Faith K Moore, K for Klavan, not no. And I will let you know when we're doing it again, and you can submit your questions. And you can always get in touch with me via Twitter or on my website, which is www.faithkmoore.com. And there's a little contact form on there. You can always reach out to me that way. But that's also where I have my blog, and you can see all the videos I've done and other things I've published in other places. So you should check that out. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel so that you get all the future episodes, and press the little bell, which apparently sends you notifications when I post a new video. So thanks so much for watching and for being here and for being a part of Princess State of Mind. It is a pleasure to get to do this, and it's because of you. So thank you so much, and I will let you know soon when the next episode will be. So stay tuned. Bye.